Are we in a national energy emergency? That's what Donald Trump said when he became president and issued a flurry of executive orders and now new tariffs. Here to explain what it means for you and your gas prices is Daniel Turner, Executive Director of Power the Future. Thanks for coming on, Daniel.
Crazy great to be with you. Thank you.
Sure. So, tariffs, everyone is freaking out a little bit, but you really don't know who to trust anymore. Let me ask you, are these tariffs, especially on Canada, going to impact our gas prices?
No, I don't believe so. I think the president uses tariffs as a bargaining chip. He admits as much. We saw, the great trade war of February 3rd, which lasted about 6 hours until both Canada and Mexico caved on tariffs. So I think the tariffs will actually never even be implemented. But I think what the president's trying to point at with these tariffs, even on Mexican and Canadian energy, and they are big energy trading partners of ours, is that under the previous administration, we had this pivot to buying oil and gas from Iran, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia. We were buying metals and minerals from communist China, and we have all of those raw materials and all this energy here. So even though clearly I wouldn't put Canada and Mexico in the category of Venezuela and Iran, they're not. They're allies and neighbors and friends, but they're still not America. And I'd much rather get natural gas from Pennsylvania, where bad energy policy has prevented us from exploring it thoroughly, than buy natural gas from the Saudis. And I think that's what these tariffs are meant to do.
Sure. And so Canada is a major producer of American energy. I don't fully understand why that is, because as you point out, the U.S. has so much domestic energy, so much domestic oil. So, why is it that we import so much from other countries when we do have it here? Of course, if the tariffs do go into effect, so far we haven't. I love that when you said the 6-day trade war or whatever. If they do go into effect, I would imagine it would affect it because Canada affect our prices and raise them because Canada does ship us so much oil. So I think long term making this transition makes sense. But how long would it take to produce enough American energy to replace some of these people we import from? Is this like a several year process? Is there going to be some pain if these tariffs come in the short term? Tell me what you think about that.
Well, I think if you go back to the first Trump administration, he was sworn in January of 17, and it took about a year, maybe a little more, but it took about a year until his energy policies really took effect, and you began to see an effect at the price point. And here's the problem with the energy industry when it comes to prices. The prices are speculative. They are forward thinking. So what we do today on energy, the prices may not be felt right away. And the prices, what we're paying right now, are not based upon reality, but they're based upon where the market thinks the future is headed. It's kind of why energy has been so darn expensive the last 4 years, even though production has been high. And if you go back to the debate, Kamala Harris talked about this a lot. We have record oil production, and we did. She's not lying. We did have record oil production. The fullness of the truth, though, is that oil that we're producing today, those record numbers, that oil was drilled 7-8 years ago. That's how long it takes to bring oil to market. By the time you lease land, by the time you drill, frack, et cetera, it's years. So yes, we're producing record oil now, but then why are prices so high? And prices are high because the market says we're producing a lot now, but I don't think the future is too bright under the Biden-Harris regime. And that's why oil has been at $70, $80 a barrel for 4 years. So for those prices to come down, the market needs to see future looks bright. And that will take some time, but it will happen.
So I think this is something that's often lost when this policy debate is had. What specifically does the president, whoever it is, Biden or Trump, what exactly do they have the power to do that actually impacts it? I think sometimes people give too much credit and too much blame to the president for the economy. I mean, the economy is huge. There's so many factors, and an executive orders can only do so much. So is it leases? What is the president able to actually do immediately that affects, domestic oil production?
Yeah, and what you're getting at is really the reason why I'm so excited about this White House Energy Council that President Trump has hinted he wants to create. And it seems kind of funny in the era of Doge and cutting costs that we're going to create a new government entity. But I think the reason why this council is so important is because we need an all-of-government solution when the attacks on energy come from every direction. So what does the president do? Well, let's go back to what the president did under the Biden administration. Before you can even do anything in oil and gas, you need money. The SEC under Gary Gensler, the Biden chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission, told banks, if you lend to the fossil fuel industry, if you have too many fossil fuel loans on your balance sheets, we're going to punish you at the federal government. We're going to charge you more to borrow money than if you were lending to the solar industry, for example. So banks are threatened. So banks don't want to lend money. So that makes it hard to finance fossil fuel projects. Then obviously leases. The Biden administration bragged that they had the lowest number of leases since World War II. Doug Burgum became more of a household name because he was the first governor to sue the Biden administration and say the law says you have to have lease sales and you're not doing it. And Deb Haaland, the former Interior Secretary, Doug Burgum has her job now. Deb Haaland said, well, I'm half Native American and I'm using indigenous knowledge, and I don't think it's time to have lease sales. And everyone said, well, you don't have to follow the law, right? Because she's indigenous. And that was the answer. So you're the fossil fuel industry. You can't get money from the banks. You don't know if you can lease land. And then on the back end, you can't get pipelines built. You could say, why do we even need your industry? Because you can't have a gas car. We're going to outlaw them by the year 2030. So you need an all-of-government solution because the attacks coming on the industry come from every single direction. So there is a lot the president can do to bring down prices, and ending punitive measures like this is literally just the beginning.
Yeah, and we've seen, for instance, I think California has a deadline coming up where you cannot sell new gas cars. I mean,
Yeah.
It's kind of incredible because and there's no way the infrastructure is there to charge electric vehicles in eastern parts of California when
No.
you're driving on a road trip. I mean, maybe in LA, but not outside of it.
Well, but what if your house was on fire in the Pasadena? What do those folks do with a charging station, right? What are we supposed to do? When the grid is faltering, and California's grid is always faltering. I joke, if you want to make money, go invest in a car dealership on the California border, because it's not illegal to have a gas car. It's just illegal to buy one. So what will Californians do? They'll go to Nevada, they'll go to Arizona, they'll go to Oregon and buy a car there. How does that help Californians? And even the auto industry itself doesn't reflect it. The people buying electric vehicles are not the average American. They're expensive. They're kind of a luxury good. I got no problem if you want to buy one, buy one. It's a free country. But these mandates that the government has put on the industry, it has just created absolute chaos. So there are so many silly steps that politicians, in the desire to combat climate change or whatever they call it, they put in these processes, these policies, these measures that just create market chaos. And that's where we are, market chaos.
So this is interesting. So you're saying what drives up the prices is the ability to access new capital and how expensive that is, which was made more difficult under the Biden administration because of higher regulations on the banks, which I'm assuming that was ESG rule,
Sure.
right?
There you go.
Stuff.
Yes.
And so and then overall inflation, which was just high across the board and impacted gasoline and prices as well. And then oil companies are looking at the overall regulatory framework and feeling uncomfortable because of rules like what's happening in California, the hostility they're seeing from the administration. And so now that we have a new administration coming in, we think that some of those, capital rules will be reduced so they can get access to more money. They're going to feel more comfortable overall. And the market is going to predict more success for oil companies. So the prices will be lower. Why? Because they'll produce more in anticipation of a better market.
Yes, this is an industry that prefers to work on volume than on price point. It is more profitable to have 100 wells at $50 a barrel than it is to have 70 wells at $90 a barrel. And even though people say they want high prices, oil companies don't want high prices. Oil companies want volume and low prices because it's more sustainable. And just to close the loop on what you were saying, all these attacks from government that we saw in the Biden administration. And then the real kicker, and this is where you sometimes, I used to have a full head of hair before I did this job, but you just go crazy. Then the real kicker is then you're an oil and gas company. They've done all these things to raise prices through the roof. So you are making record money, but you can't get more leases. You can't drill. They've banned fracking. So you have this money. So what do? You buy back your stock shares. You give out bigger bonuses, and then you get called before Congress, and they yell at you and say, "How dare you?" What the hell else am I supposed to do with my money? Right? You can't let me invest it in the industry. I can't burn it. So I give it back to the shareholders. And compare the first Trump administration with the Biden administration. When the oil and gas industry was able to operate in the first term, you never had accusations of price gouging. There was no crazy pollution. You never heard about profiteering, and oil averaged around $52 a barrel. Now you've got big government under Biden coming in. Oil is averaging $85, $90 a barrel, and you're blaming these executives for being greedy and rich. It's amazing how freedom did something better than big government, because ultimately we believe in freedom and free markets. And if this industry is allowed to operate in free markets, you're not going to see profiteering. You're not going to see pollution. You're going to see a better economy for the most people, because that's how capitalism works. But Joe Biden doesn't believe in capitalism. He believes in government. And that's the big difference of this last election.
Daniel, thanks for joining us. I love getting a little deeper in this. I think the Republicans often are not able to articulate some of the points you did. They just kind of use cliches and throw things out there and promise to lower prices. And sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. And that's kind of a weak argument when you're so vague against some of the climate and environmental concerns that are very real to people. And so I wanted to have you on to dig a little deeper. I think you provided that. So thanks for coming on. Daniel Turner, Power of the Future.
Thank you, Casey. Great to be with you.